The gate agent called Zone 1 boarding, and Celeste Okafor didn't look up. She was already in her element. Noise-canceling headphones around her neck like a crown she hadn't fully placed yet, fingers moving across her phone screen with the quiet authority of someone who had 17 things happening simultaneously and was managing all of them beautifully. Her carry-on was Rimowa, midnight black. Her coat was camel cashmere. The small gold badge clipped to her lapel read, SXSW Interactive, featured speaker. But none of that is why the woman at the gate nearly dropped her scanner. It was the spreadsheet. Celeste Okafor, 31 years old, senior audio engineer and independent podcast producer based out of Chicago, had a color-coded Excel sheet open that charted the acoustic frequency profiles of 67 different airport terminals across North America. She'd been building it for 2 years. It was, objectively, the nerdiest thing anyone had ever done with a business-class boarding pass. "Ma'am," the gate agent said, eyes wide, "is that a sound map?" "A frequency catalog," Celeste said pleasantly, finally looking up. JFK's Terminal 4 has a really unfortunate standing wave problem between gates B32 and B36. It makes gate announcements sound like they're being delivered by a haunted submarine. Someone should know about this. The gate agent stared at her. "Have a great flight," Celeste added, tucking her phone away and boarding. Her best friend Kezia had texted 4 times during this exchange. Celeste only read them once she was settled in, Seat 2A, window, Los Angeles bound. The most coveted seat on a morning flight when you know how the sun tracks west and you want to sleep through Texas. Kezia. You're going to nail SXSW Kezia. Also, you forgot your AKG condenser on my kitchen counter. Kezia. Celeste Kezia. You literally cannot present the future of immersive audio talk without a microphone. My love. Celeste closed her eyes. She breathed in through her nose. The particular smell of premium cabin recycled air. Synthetic cleanliness layered over someone's too heavy cologne. The faint ghost of fresh coffee being poured 2 rows back. She cataloged it the way she cataloged everything, as information, as texture, as something that would eventually become sound in her brain even if it never made a noise. She had the microphone. It was in her checked bag. She texted Kezia back a single photo of it nestled in its case like a sleeping baby, and Kezia responded with a string of praying hand emojis. The seat beside her, 2B, was empty. For about 4 minutes, the man who dropped into it moved the way people move when they've spent too long being watched in public. Efficiently, unobtrusively, like he was trying to take up exactly as much space as was required and no more. Dark jeans, a plain gray crewneck that probably cost more than most people's rent. No jewelry, except a single thin watch. Sunglasses already off, tucked into his collar. Hair pushed back slightly like he'd run a hand through it once and forgotten about it. He was, Celeste registered with the involuntary clarity of someone who'd grown up with 2 older sisters who'd trained her eye for these things. Extremely good-looking in a way that seemed almost inconvenient. Like the universe had been generous and then felt vaguely apologetic about it. He didn't look at her. He pulled out his phone, opened what appeared to be a voice memo app, and started typing notes into it with focused, methodical energy. Fine, Celeste thought. Fellow introvert, we'll have a lovely flight ignoring each other. She put her headphones on. 40 seconds later, he tapped her shoulder. She turned, one ear cup lifted. "Sorry," he said. His English was fluent with a Korean accent that smoothed the edges of certain consonants. "I think I have your—" He held up a pair of wireless earbuds in a very small case. "They were on my seat." Celeste looked at the earbuds, looked at his face, looked back at the earbuds. "Those are mine," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why You could have just set them on the armrest," He blinked. Yes, I could have done that. A beat. Thank you, she said, taking them. He nodded and returned to his phone. She returned to her headphones. The plane taxied, and that was when she made the mistake of glancing at his screen. Not to be nosy, just because she was a sound person, and sound people are fundamentally curious about everything, and the voice memo app he was using was one she recognized, one she'd reviewed professionally for an audio engineering forum 2 years ago, given 3 stars, noted a critical flaw in the spatialization algorithm. Merf, and then basically forgotten about. Except he wasn't using it as a voice memo app. He was using the advanced mode, the mode buried 4 menu levels deep that almost no one found, running some kind of binaural analysis that she had genuinely never seen done on a commercial flight before. Celeste Okafor, who prided herself on being unimpressible, was impressed. She did not say anything, but she watched. 2 hours into the flight, somewhere over Missouri, the first thing she said to him, intentionally said, with thought behind it, was this: "You've got a phase cancellation issue in Channel 4. He looked up so fast she almost felt bad about it. What? Your binaural rendering. She nodded at his screen without pointing. Professional courtesy for someone's work in progress. You've got 2 mics running at slightly different gains and the software is treating them as identical inputs. You'll get comb filtering around 800 Hz. Whatever you're trying to capture is going to sound like it's underwater." The man stared at her with an expression she recognized well. It was the expression people made right before they decided whether to be defensive or genuinely curious. He was clearly someone who defaulted to the second option. Something in his posture shifted. The careful economy of his movements gave way to something more open. "How did you—" He stopped, looked at his screen, looked back at her. "I've been working on this setup for 6 hours. 3 engineers reviewed it." 3 engineers who aren't specialized in spatial audio, she said, not unkindly. "It's a very specific thing to catch. Most people don't notice until playback." He turned back to the app. His fingers moved, navigating those buried menus, and after about 45 seconds of concentrated adjustment, he ran a test tone. He listened. His eyebrows shifted, not dramatically, but in the way that meant he'd just heard exactly what she'd described. He looked at her with an entirely different expression than the one he'd had 3 minutes ago. "Who are you?" he said, and it came out more raw than he intended. She could hear it. The involuntary sincerity of someone asking a question they genuinely don't know the answer to. "Celeste Okafor," she said. "I'm a sound engineer. Independent. I also produce audio for a podcast network, and I consult for studios when they want someone who will tell them hard truths about their acoustic environments." She paused. "You?" "Seongjin Kwon." He said it without elaboration, which she respected. "What are you capturing?" she asked. A very slight hesitation. "I'm developing an immersive audio experience for a music platform. Spatial audio for recorded live performances. We're trying to make it feel like you're actually in the room, not just stereo-widened, actually there. Hearing the room the way the room hears itself." Celeste went very still. Not on the outside. On the outside, she was still and composed. But inside, she had the particular feeling of someone who has just heard their own obsession described by someone else using different words for the same thing. "That's my SXSW talk," she said. The silence that followed was approximately 3 seconds long and contained several entire conversations that neither of them had yet. "I'm sorry?" "My talk at SXSW Interactive tomorrow. The Architecture of Presence. Why Spatial Audio is the Next Frontier of Live Experience." "That's—" "You're doing what I'm researching." Seongjin looked at her for a long moment. "Which company are you presenting for?" "Myself," she said. "I'm independent." "You?" "Resonance." He said it simply. I know what resonance is." She heard something land in her own voice that she hadn't quite intended, sharper than neutral. Because she did know what Resonance was. Resonance was the Seoul-headquartered audio tech company that had closed a $200 million Series B 6 weeks ago and was currently the biggest competitor to the startup she'd been quietly advising for the past 8 months. "You're going to SXSW to announce the spatial audio platform." "We're presenting, yes." "We're both presenting." "It appears so." Another silence. This one more complicated. "Well," Celeste said, and she put her headphones fully back on. He didn't say anything. She watched his reflection in the window, dim and transparent against the white of cloud cover over Kansas, as he turned back to his own screen and began correcting the phase cancellation issue she'd pointed out. He corrected it exactly the way she would have. Inconvenient, she thought. 3 minutes later, he tapped her shoulder again. She removed one ear cup. "I want to say," he said carefully, "that I'm not interested in competitive intelligence or anything of that nature. I didn't accuse you of anything. You got quiet in a very specific way." She looked at him. "That's very perceptive." "I pay attention to audio," he said. "Silence has texture." Celeste stared at him for a moment. Then, despite herself, she felt the corner of her mouth move. "That's a very good line," she said. "Did you rehearse it?" "Just now," he said, straight-faced. "Was it convincing?" "7s out of 10. What would make it a 10? Longer pause before delivery. Let the silence do more work. You rushed it." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. "Noted." She put her headphones back on. But the frequency between them had changed. That was the word for it, she realized later. Frequency. 2 signals that had been running parallel had just crossed, and neither of them had adjusted their transmitter. The interference had happened on its own. The meal service came. Celeste ordered the mushroom risotto and asked for black coffee, no cream. Seongjin ordered the same without knowing she had. He'd been looking at his screen when the attendant came to her side, and when their trays arrived matching, they both noticed at the same time. "Great minds," he said. "Or limited menus," she said. But she was smiling, and he could see it. By the time the coffee cups were cleared, they were talking. It began with technical specifics. Phase relationships, head-related transfer functions, the limitations of current binaural processing on consumer earbuds, and stayed technical for approximately 20 minutes, which was 20 minutes longer than most people could have followed it. But then Celeste said something about recording a traditional Yoruba Bata drum ceremony in Lagos 3 years ago, and how the acoustic properties of the open-air space had created a natural reverb tail she'd never been able to fully reproduce in a studio. And something in Seongjin's whole face changed. "Tell me about the room," he said, and he meant the sound of the room, and she knew he meant that. So she described it. The particular frequency of 30 people sitting on a packed earth floor. The way the drumming interacted with the corrugated metal roof of the meeting space. Not perfectly, not cleanly. All that texture, all that imperfection that made it real. He listened the way very few people listened. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't glance around. He was entirely present in a way she felt rather than saw. And it made the story pour out of her differently, fuller, richer, more specific, because she could feel it landing. "I grew up listening to pansori," he said when she finished. "Traditional Korean singing. My grandmother sang. It's... The emotion in the voice is meant to be imperfect. The breaks, the roughness. Hyungwa sorum. Goosebumps and tears at the same time. The Koreans have a word for when music makes you feel both things simultaneously." "We have something like that," Celeste said quietly. "In Yoruba, it's the feeling the bata creates when it talks to you. Like the drum is a person. Like the instrument remembers something you forgot." She looked at him. Yes. The silence this time was different from all the others. It was the kind of silence that had warmth in it. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it from reflex. Yen and the name on the screen made her stomach drop. Derek. Launchpad. Launchpad Audio was the startup she'd been advising. Derek Chen was its founder and her closest professional partner for 8 months. The text read, Celeste. Call me before SXSW. Resonance has something. Someone leaked our spatial positioning algorithm. I think there's a spy in our network. I need to know if it's someone on the advisory board. The warmth drained from the air around her. She read the message once. Twice. Advisory board. She was on the advisory board. There were 3 other members. The algorithm was proprietary. If Resonance had it. She looked at Seongjin. He was looking back at her, and he'd noticed the change in her face because of course he had. Everything okay? He said. Fine, she said. From the voice she used when nothing was fine, and she was processing it privately. She turned back to her window and thought about the fact that she was sitting next to the VP of engineering, because she'd quietly placed him now. She'd seen his face in a TechCrunch piece 8 months ago, though she hadn't been able to name him until he said his name, of the company that may have stolen from the startup she'd spent 8 months of her professional credibility protecting. She thought about the warmth that had just been sitting between them. She thought about frequencies and interference, and she thought, with a cold clarity that she hated, that she needed to know which side of this he was on before the plane landed. She excused herself to the lavatory, texted Kezia from the door. Celeste. I need a full background check on Seongjin Kwon. Resonance Audio Kezia. In the next 3 hours? Kezia. Where are you that you need this, Celeste, 35,000 feet next to him? The 3 typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. A full minute passed. Kezia. Girl Kezia. Okay, I'm calling Marcus. He does due diligence for the fund. Kezia. Also, is he cute? Celeste. Kezia. Kezia. Is he cute? Celeste. Focus. Kezia. That means yes. Celeste pocketed her phone, looked at herself in the lavatory mirror. Professional, composed, 1 SXSW speaker badge and 17 unresolved feelings. And walked back to her seat. The last 40 minutes of the flight were quiet in the wrong way. Celeste worked. Seongjin worked. The warmth between them had not disappeared. It sat there, present and complicated, like a signal she couldn't quite tune out. But she'd built something around herself, and he could sense it, because he was exactly the kind of person who sensed those things. He waited until the descent announcement before he said anything. You received news that changed how you're looking at me. She didn't look up from her laptop. I don't know what you're talking about. Celeste. He said her name simply, not manipulatively, not with pressure. Just, your name is Celeste, and I'm saying it because you're a person and I'd like to talk to you as one. She closed her laptop. Do you know what Launchpad Audio is? She said. A pause. The spatial audio startup. Yes. I advise them. A longer pause. Derek Chen reached out to me about 2 hours ago, she continued, voice level, to say that Resonance has their proprietary positioning algorithm. He thinks someone on their advisory board leaked it. She looked at Seongjin fully. I'm on that board. Something crossed Seongjin's face. Several things, actually, in rapid succession. She watched them arrive and didn't try to read them fast. She let them settle. The way you let a room's reverb tail decay before you judge its character. I didn't know you were on that board, he said. I genuinely didn't know who you were until you told me your name. I know you didn't know, she said. That's not what I'm asking. What are you asking? Does Resonance have their algorithm? He was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the first smear of Los Angeles glittered through the clouds below, a galaxy lying flat on its side. There was an allegation about 3 weeks ago, he said, that a resonance engineer had accessed a code repository they weren't authorized to access. I raised the concern internally. I was told it was being investigated. He met her eyes. I don't know what was in that repository. I left the investigation to legal because I was told to. Do you believe the investigation was real? The question hung. I don't know, he said. And the simplicity of it, not a defense, not an explanation, just an honest I don't know, was more credible to her than any elaborate answer would have been. She studied him. Why are you telling me this? She said. I'm a potential adversary. In 12 hours, we're both presenting at the same conference in the same vertical. Because, he said, and for the first time since they'd started talking, something cracked in his composure. Not dramatically, just at the edges, like the first hairline fracture in something that has been held too tightly for too long. I've been in rooms where no one tells the truth, and I'm tired of it. And you fixed my audio setup and you told me about bata drums and you described a room you recorded 3 years ago so precisely that I could hear it. And I don't want to lie to someone who listens like that. The landing gear deployed below them. Celeste looked at her hands, then at the window, then at him. My friend is running a background check on you right now, she said, from her apartment in Chicago. He blinked. Your friend is... Her name is Kezia. She knows a due diligence guy. She's been texting me updates for the past 40 minutes. Something shifted on his face. Was it possible that a man in his position found this funny? It appeared so. What has she found? That you graduated from KAIST with a degree in acoustic engineering, that you have a younger sister named Jiyeon, who is a landscape architect in Busan, that you have been VP of engineering at Resonance for 3 years, and... She glanced at the most recent text. That you apparently left a 2-star Yelp review for a Korean restaurant in San Francisco in 2022, calling the kimchi jjigae an affront to my ancestors. A beat of silence. The kimchi jjigae, he said carefully, was genuinely terrible. She says your ancestors would be proud of your standards. He laughed, a real laugh, short and surprised. And it sounded completely different from the careful, contained person who'd sat down in 3.5 hours ago. Celeste felt something in her chest unhinge itself. The allegation, she said, more quietly. What are you going to do about it? The laughter faded, but the openness stayed. I filed an internal report 3 weeks ago and was told to stay out of it. I kept copies of everything. He looked at her steadily. I don't know if it will be enough. Would you be willing to share the report with Launchpad's legal team? Celeste? I'm not asking you to throw your company under a bus. I'm asking you whether you're willing to make sure that if something wrong happened, it gets corrected. The wheels touched down. The cabin jolted gently, the roar of reverse thrust filling the silence. He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said. SXSW was chaos in the best possible sense. The kind of productive, electric, slightly too loud chaos that Celeste had been addicted to since her first conference at 23, when she'd sat in a folding chair in the back row of a panel on podcast monetization and thought, I belong here. This is where the frequencies live. She presented at 11 a.m. in Hall 5. Seongjin presented at 2 p.m. in Hall 3. She didn't look for him before her panel. She set up her equipment. Mic check, room acoustics walk. Hall 5 had reasonable absorption but a reflective back wall she compensated for. Monitor levels. And she did what she always did. She stood at the front of the room before anyone came in, closed her eyes, and listened to the room breathe. Kezia had flown in that morning. She was in the front row with an iced coffee that was definitely too large for a conference setting, wearing a yellow blazer that was visible from space, vibrating with a specific energy that meant she had already done too much research and had opinions. He called you 3 times, Kezia said when Celeste came off stage after a standing ovation and a line of people 20 deep wanting cards. Who? Who? Kezia gave her a look. The man from the plane, Celeste. I had my phone off for the panel. He also apparently gave a statement this morning. Kezia held up her phone. On it was a TechCrunch alert, time-stamped 9:47 a.m., 2 hours before Celeste's panel. Resonance Audio VP raises internal IP theft concern. Company announces external review. Celeste read it twice, then she called him back. He picked up on the first ring. I saw the article, she said without preamble. I went to the board directly this morning, he said. His voice was measured, but she could hear the undercurrent. The specific exhaustion of someone who has done a hard thing and is standing in the aftermath of it. I wasn't willing to wait. Whatever happens to my position there, I'm not... He stopped. Reconstructed. I kept those copies for a reason. Seongjin. Yes. Your panel is in 3 hours. I'm aware. Are you okay? A pause. Longer than his others. I'm not certain, he said. I've spent 3 years building something at that company. The platform we're launching is genuinely good work. And Another pause. I believe in the work even if I don't believe in everything around it. Come to Hall 5, she said. I just finished. And I want you to hear something. She played him the Bata recording in the green room. Not the clean version, not the processed version. The raw field recording, with all the imperfection intact. The packed earth acoustics, the metal roof, the 30 people breathing, the drum speaking. She watched his face as he listened. He didn't say anything for a long time after it ended. That's what we're both trying to do, he said finally. Make people feel the room. Yeah. Your approach and our approach are not actually that different. No, she agreed. They're not. He looked at her. Launchpad's algorithm is better than ours in the mid-range spatialization. If we'd licensed it legitimately instead of... He stopped. If it was taken without authorization, that's not a competition issue. That's a theft issue. And it doesn't... Another stop. She waited. It doesn't make the work legitimate. No, she said. It doesn't. I want to fix it. I know. I also want... He looked at her with the particular expression of a person who has decided something and is now going to say it regardless of whether it is strategically advisable. I want to see you again, not at a conference, not in a professional context. I want to have dinner with you and I want to argue about spatialization algorithms for several hours, and I want to hear more about the rooms you've recorded. Celeste looked at him. The green room hummed faintly around them. HVAC and distant crowd noise, and the low-frequency presence of several thousand people, all broadcasting their own signals. She heard all of it. And she heard him. The kimchi jjigae allegation concerns me, she said. I stand by it. My grandmother makes egusi soup, she said. If you call it anything less than transcendent, I will revise my entire opinion of you. I would never, he said, and his voice was serious in a way that meant he was also completely delighted. Disrespect someone's grandmother's soup. I have Korean grandmothers. I know exactly what that means. Good answer, she said. 7 out of 10. What would make it a 10? She tilted her head. Commit to the dinner first. Tonight, he said without hesitation. 8 o'clock, she said. And you're picking the restaurant. Korean? Try me, she said. 2 hours later, Hall 3 was standing room only. Celeste sat in the back because she'd told herself she was just going to listen to the first few minutes and then go finalize the agreement she and Derek had drafted that morning. A licensing deal, properly this time, equitable and documented, that her presence on Launchpad's board had helped formalize in a single phone call. She stayed for the whole hour. Seongjin presented like someone who had spent his entire career building toward this room. Precise and passionate, and technically brilliant in a way that never became inaccessible. that always brought you back to the human thing at the center of it. I want you to feel like you're actually there. I want you to hear the room the way the room hears itself. He didn't use her words. He didn't need to. They were the same words. Arrived at separately? Because some frequencies travel toward each other regardless of the distance between their origins. During the Q&A, a journalist in the front row asked him about the morning's TechCrunch story. The room shifted. A held breath. Seongjin looked at the journalist the way Celeste had seen him look at difficult things. Directly, without deflection. "What I can tell you," he said, "is that great work doesn't become legitimate just because a company needs it to be. If resonance benefited from something we shouldn't have, we owe a correction. I'm committed to making sure that happens." A brief pause. "The technology I'm presenting today is built on work I believe in. The circumstances around it need to be right before we launch it. That's the standard I'm holding us to." The room was very quiet. Then someone started clapping. That evening, in a Korean restaurant in East Austin that Seongjin had chosen with the precision of someone who had actually researched every option and eliminated all the ones that would embarrass him. Raw wood tables, low lighting like amber in water, the smell of doenjang and sesame, and something slow cooking that hit Celeste in the chest like a memory she didn't have. They sat across from each other with a bottle of macchioli between them and talked until the staff started stacking chairs around them. He told her about his grandmother in Busan who made miyeokguk on every birthday and who called him every Sunday regardless of time zones, and who had never heard of spatial audio, but called him a sound sculptor after he tried to explain it once. And that, he said, was the best description he'd ever been given. She told him about her mother in Lagos, who thought podcasting was telling stories on a machine, and had introduced her to every relative as "my daughter who makes very expensive radio." He laughed until he had to put down his glass. She felt it in her whole body. The frequency of his laugh, the particular warmth of it, the way it took up space without apology. "My mom is going to have questions," she said, already somewhere far ahead in her mind, where this was a continuing thing, where the frequency was still transmitting. "She's going to call you within a week of knowing your name. My mother is going to attempt to feed you until you can't move," he said. "And then feel guilty that it wasn't enough." Sounds like a challenge. "She also does not speak English, but she will communicate entirely through food offerings and significant looks. Honestly, that's how my grandmother communicates too. We'll be fine." He reached across the table. Not for her hand. Just across, setting his between them. Close, but not assuming. An offer more than a statement. She looked at it. She thought about 5 a.m. at JFK, the frequency catalog on her phone, the gate agent who'd looked at her like she was extraordinary. She thought about a seat in Zone 1 and a pair of wireless earbuds and the particular sound of a stranger saying, "Silence has texture with complete sincerity and terrible timing." She thought about the bata drum speaking to her in a metal-roofed room in Lagos. She thought about the way some rooms remember things you forgot. She put her hand over his. Outside, Austin hummed at its particular frequency. Traffic and live music and the low, constant energy of a city full of people making things. And Celeste Okafor, senior audio engineer, independent producer, woman who had spent her entire career listening to what rooms were trying to say, heard all of it. And for the first time in a very long time, she heard herself in it too. Some signals travel halfway around the world, looking for the one frequency that makes them whole. She hadn't been looking, but she'd always known how to listen.